Hello, participants. My name is Nixon Karithi, and I am your instructor for the course, The Role of the Media in Making the African Free Continental Trade Agreement Work. Module number 1, Understanding Intra-African Trade and Economic Cooperation. Identifying trade and economic cooperation issues. Economic treaty. An economic treaty is a binding agreement between countries. Trade agreements are treaties between 3 or more nations. The agreements reduce tariffs and duties, making it easier for businesses to import and export between the member countries. Bilateral treaty. A bilateral trade agreement allows 2 countries to trade exclusively with each other. Such trade relations are often based on each country granting the other most favored nation status. Such status implies that the 2 bilateral partners provide concessions, privileges, and immunity in trade agreements. The bilateral treaty may become a multilateral treaty if additional countries accede to it. Research shows that bilateral agreements increase trade, open up markets, and increase competition and also promote employment. Identifying trade and economic cooperation issues. Multilateral treaty. A multilateral treaty is a treaty to which 3 or more countries are joined. Each party owes the same obligations to all other parties, except to the extent that they have stated reservations. Under the WTO, multilateral treaties and agreements involve contracting parties. The WTO multilateral agreements have been preceded by extensive negotiations that sometimes end in stalemates. One character of these agreements is the difficulties to negotiate between member countries. Some regional trade agreements are also multilateral in nature. Africa's regional economic opportunity. Africa's regional economic communities. Africa's current integration landscape contains an array of regional economic communities. These include the 8 recognized communities as the building blocks of the African Union. The 8 are the Arab Maghreb Union, the CEN SAD, MAU, the CEN SAD, COMESA, the African Community, the ECCAS, ECOWAS, IGAD, and SADC. Plurilateral treaty. In a world in which multilateral agreements take years to conclude and are beset with implementation challenges, negotiations at a smaller scale and amongst fewer countries with mutual economic and development interests are increasingly getting common. Agreements and negotiations on such basis are referred to as pluralistic agreements. These are the ones that are signed between fewer countries and are used to administer the agreement before the broader multilateral agreement takes control. There are debates about the extent to which the pluralistic agreements or the regional trade agreements could be preferred as stepping stones to broader and open WTO agreements. Looking at the array and the arrangement of African RECs, you will find that in West Africa, there is a number of organizations. For example, they have ECOWAS, which is the Economic Organization of West African States. There is the Monetary Union of Western Africa, and In Central Africa, there is also a number of organizations. There is CIMAC, there is ECAS, there is SENSAD. In North Africa, we have the Maghreb, Arab Maghreb community. In Eastern and Northeastern Africa, we have the East African community, we have IGAD, and then coming to Eastern and Southern Africa, we have COMISA. And we also have, in the Southern African side, we have SADC, as well as SACU. And then on the Indian Ocean islands, Mauritius, Madagascar, Seychelles, and all those other islands, we have the IOC. And all these RECs, or regional economic cooperation agreements, all of them have links with one another. And that is what this particular slide is trying to explain, the interrelation between all the different entities that operate in Africa. Here are some practical news gathering questions for you. Do you know what RECs are? In general, what should established RECs do? How many regional economic communities is your country a member of? And how many regional economic communities are there across Africa? Do you know when your country joined each of these economic communities? Do you know why? What benefits does your country receive from membership into these economic communities? What key questions would you ask officials of the economic communities operating in your country? What benefits or challenges are observed from your country being a member of these economic communities? To answer the above questions, set aside some time each week to gather information that helps you answer each of these questions. As you gather the information, think of potential news stories and features that you can write. Give some feedback to your editor or your supervisor about how this exercise has enriched your media practice. Use this module as a foundation to generate new interest in the work of economic communities in your country, in your region, and in the rest of Africa. Ensure that you maintain the practice of a weekly significant news story about trade and economic cooperation in Africa. Here are some examples for you when you think about how to report trade. And the first example that you have is a story that was published in October 2019, and it's dealing with the issue of economic cooperation and how it can help in promoting development in Africa. This particular story was quoting an official, a senior official of the Africa Union's private sector development, investment and resource mobilization program. And notice how the senior official talks about the importance of regional economic communities, the ones in Africa, wherever they are, and how they have helped in promoting trade and economic development around the continent. And also what is important is also the history of how we get to be where we are. Among the issues that are important for you to remember is the Abuja Treaty that helped establish the African Economic Community. And that treaty, the Abuja Treaty, was adopted on the 3rd of June 1991 in the capital of Nigeria, in Abuja.